So you probably wondered why I haven't posted for the past, what, 2 weeks? Well, it's because I decided to literally torture myself. I was just chilling on my YouTube homepage, just watching videos. Then all of a sudden, this video came up. And the overall strat didn't look that bad. It actually looked pretty simple, especially the final wave where you get to fight the big. It's worth to mention at this point that I haven't even beaten hardcore yet, so yeah, don't get too jealous. So let's go ahead and try to defeat this game mode once and for all.
This was a fucking mistake, by the way.
On multiple occasions, aka every single game, I just wanted to kill myself. Now, as I was researching on pretty much hardcore videos, or not necessarily the ones you're thinking of, there are a ton of videos on the web or whatever, and they are all about showing the long or tedious process of beating hardcore, and really just the entire guide, so I'm just going to be doing that. Now, full credit, this is not my strategy. Like I said, I watched a video, so you can watch this video originally in the description. All credit goes to him. I did not beat this. This is not my strat, so all credit goes to him. I have no idea who else made it or whatever, but this is the strat I got from him. But after like the 50th game, I started to alternate the strategy a bit, pretty much making a few changes early on, and started to essentially make it to where this strat was a bit more, I guess, promising and better. However, if you want to watch the original strat, then you can just down in the description. But this is just my altered strat that you can see in the video. Now, I will say that I'm going to be through this entire thing, I'm going to be talking about my experience through the entire solo hardcore, I guess, adventure or torture. So essentially you could just mute this and just copy the entire guide on screen. However, if you just want to watch the guide and my rambling, that's fine as well. But this is going to be a bit different than your usual hardcore fetish type of thing. So first off is this necessarily hard? Like, obviously it says in the name, hardcore, so it's obviously going to be extremely difficult. Well, from arranging this from a 1 to 10, I would say generally this is at minimum a 7.5. It isn't that hard, especially when you get the strategy down. Either essentially have it glued to your head, like after the 30th match I literally didn't even look at the footage at all. I literally just started to place things down wave by wave and essentially just had the strat glued to my brain. Now, I didn't even need the video at all, but that isn't necessarily saying that's a good thing, because that just goes to show that I have done this for so long that I literally know the strat by heart. But in all aspects, this game mode isn't hard for both solo and trios. It isn't that hard. The thing is mainly, of course, strategizing. That's mainly the thing about, or the main concept of TDS, strategizing and working together. And once you get that down, it's not hard. The difficult thing about this game mode is the RNG aspect in this game mode specifically. Now, all the other games have RNG aspects, such as, for an example, Polluted Wasteland. There is the polluted monster who can essentially spawn a bunch of AI dudes. This monster who can spawn a bunch of AI slime dudes, and if he spams that like crazy, aka RNG makes him spam that like crazy, this will eventually give you the fail, because I mean, like, it's pure RNG. Will he just stun the map with his fist or his leg, or will he essentially be doing nothing all game to where you can get an easy win? It's pure RNG on what he does next. That's the same thing for the Void Reaver, which we'll talk about later on. First off, let's go over. Is solo harder than trios? Yes, it is. It is literally 5 times harder. But once you get the strategy down, it isn't that hard. It's just the RNG aspect, or just mechanic, that just makes this so infuriatingly difficult. But with the RNG aspect plus being a solo dude, I gotta say it raises it up to an 8 or a 9. Mainly because it's just a gamble if you're gonna be lucky and you're gonna have a clean run, or you're just gonna get fucked over the entire game, or at the very last part to where it's pretty much impossible. Alright, now that we've gone over that, let's go over the entire, or just video guide thing. So, there is no really problems from like wave 1 all the way until like wave 11 or 12, but Wave 12, I believe from memory, since I've done this so many times, is when the balloon dudes come around, and this is where you need to place your pursuits. And this is where the true rage of my passion for the fucking pursuit just comes out to play. The pursuit is a moving tower, as you all know. He goes in a circle just like the ace pilot. However, unlike the ace pilot, when he detects an enemy, he immediately stops where he detects the enemy and starts to essentially just rail down at them with his bullets and RPGs once you eventually get him up to a higher level. Now, the thing about the pursuit is, in this strat, it's a gamble as well on depending what he's going to do next, aka if he's going to move to the right or left. Because there are many times in the games I played, aka I played over, or to clarify, I played over 200 games, lost all those games. So I essentially know a lot about the pursuits mechanics or whatever, or just the randomness. Because there will be times when he detects a balloon dude or an enemy, and after he kills them or they get out of his detection range, aka like his blasting range, he will either just move right or go left. And this will essentially affect how he will detect and move around, and the faster he will get to enemies later on through the entire game. Because randomly, there are times when there is this path on the wrecked battlefield, like the top right where the cowboy is, where he will, after he defeats an enemy, he will just randomly turn left or turn right. And if enemies are approaching the little U-turn area, the final part in wrecked battlefield where the entire last stand is, if they are approaching there and the pursuit goes the opposite direction from them, this can literally screw you over. Because if there is a huge army approaching the entire last stand checkpoints and the balloon dudes are in the front and are already just going for it, and your pursuit is just on the way to like the very back of the army and not to the balloon boys specifically, you are going to lose. These fuckers deal 25 damage. Each balloon boy does 25 damage if they have their balloon, and with no damage they get to the end. If 4 of them get to the end, you lose. Now, obviously, if you take down the balloons and they fall to the ground, they're not going to do as much damage. However, to pretty much combat these guys, you need to have the pursuit being locked onto the strongest so you can take down the balloon dude as fast as possible. That way, the cowboy and the pursuit can take down the very fragile and not too fast or deadly balloon guys that are walking around. Pretty much stage 2 of them that are just very weak and just, you know, the path, or I guess the aftermath of successfully countering the balloon dudes. The pursuits, the problem with this is that the pursuit will just randomly turn right or left after locking on or defeating an enemy, and this will affect your entire playthrough, because sometimes after defeating an enemy and there's an army approaching, he will just go the complete opposite direction and just let the army go into the last stand point and essentially get halfway to the end goal hole in the wall, and it will essentially just ruin everything. But sometimes he will actually make the right decision and turn right or left and essentially counter, or as you could say, like go directly in front of the army and just start to mow them down. That is amazing. However, since it's also a gamble on which way he will turn, there are many matches where he just turned the opposite direction and it just screwed over my entire run so much that I always just said that this is the worst fucking tower in the entire game. Now, you can't really blame me, I guess, because this was like further into like the 80th game I have played in hardcore, and just to be honest, I have played more than like 200 hours in fucking TDS, so I was just frustrated that I hadn't beaten it once and that I had essentially lost super early on. So the pursuit gambling thing was just such an frustrating aspect of this strategy. The next thing we want to talk about, or at least I want to talk about further away, is the boss rounds. So currently I don't really know if the Fallen Titan is considered a boss round. I mean, he is a mini boss after all. He's essentially a dude with 6,000 HP and he has an entire knight outfit or whatever and a hammer, and for sometimes he will actually like not even target your troops at all, which is great since you get to mow him down and collect 6,000 with your cowboys and essentially rake in a ton tons of cash, and this is essentially an amazing RNG play. However, some other times you will just blast your troops with one hammer swing, pretty much freezing, aka stunning like 10 troops with one swing, which in all reality is, I guess you could say, not in a positive light, because you want your cowboys to essentially try to grind and milk as much money as possible from enemies before they get out of the first area, you know, when they're like in that second area that you'll start seeing here. You want them to milk as much money as possible, so when the Fallen Titan, for whatever reason, just freezes a ton of them and gets past that area without too much of a beating, it really sucks, because if you didn't do that, you would have gotten mad big cash. So the RNG on this guy isn't that bad, since, you know, if you defeat him, you do get 6k money, so there's not really too much there. But anyway, the two bosses I'm going to be talking about next is the Gravedigger and Molten Dude. So the Gravedigger and Molten Dude pretty much have the exact same mechanics, apart from just one major difference: their main HP wise. You see, the Gravedigger and Molten both pretty much have two of the same abilities. They both can slam their they could stomp the ground and essentially stun a large portion of the map, aka area, to stun your troops. And the second ability is calling in minions to essentially help out. And the third ability for the Molten is just stunning or whatever, but it's like a fireball, but that's not really important. The main thing about the times when you get to the Molten and Gravedigger boss fights is that this also heavily, all of the strats on YouTube heavily rely on RNG for the Molten and Gravedigger, because as long as they continuously spawn their AIs, aka their minions, to come and help them out during their boss fights, that means you're getting much more money than you originally should have gotten. So most of these strats online, aka on the internet, are just like, try and hope that the Molten and Gravedigger will spawn a ton of enemies, that way you will get tons of cash, and that way you can essentially get a head start and make this strategy possible. And a lot of the times, in most people's circumstances, I believe, these guys will just either stomp their foot on the ground, which essentially means that your troops, aka cowboys, won't have the chance to essentially grind out as much money as possible, which kind of ruins the strategy a bit. But the bad thing about these guys is that if RNG is just not on your side, and if you're not lucky enough, you will just not have the chance to get any money from them, since they're constantly stomping the ground over and over and over again, pretty much not allowing you and your team, as you could say, troops, to get any bonus cash on them, and you have to essentially finish them off with your rangers if you're not lucky enough and you don't get that much cash. Now, as you can see, sometime in the strategy, you will essentially have to save up a ton of cash on wave 42 through wave 44, so that way on wave 45 you will get a ton of cash and have to spend it all on maxing out 8 of your accelerators, since on wave 45 this is when it starts to get very difficult, since there are a bunch of slow and fast kings that essentially go through the entire map with ease, and since they are spammed like crazy, you need those accelerators to essentially be very helpful in order to take them down very easily. Now that we've gone over the terrible RNG for these two bosses, that they need to spawn a bunch of their minions in order to make this strategy possible, let's get over to the final part of this hardcore experience that just infuriates me the absolute most. I'm going to be talking about next is the final wave, or at least the final portions of hardcore. You see, on around wave 49, this is when you meet another secret-ish boss, or at least a boss that only resides in hardcore, the Vindicators. These guys, Jesus Christ, dude, I hate them so much, even after and during my entire playthrough of hardcore. At first, I thought these guys were just incredibly difficult, and that after defeating them, or during the entire gameplay, they weren't going to be too bad, you know? But I could not have been more wrong. These guys have a ton of HP, 40,000 HP in total, which is essentially a grave digger kind of. Wait, I think he does have 40,000. So yeah, you literally have to defeat one grave digger on this very specific map, or at least on this very specific wave. And the thing about this guy is that he is not that slow. And also, instead of having an ability to where he only targets and stuns one troop, this guy has a hammer that essentially is able to not defeat, but to stun 3 towers at the exact same time. But not only that, whatever tower comes into contact with his hammer has an also area effect, to where if there's any towers to where that hammer he throws to hits, any nearby tower will also get stunned. So if you have like I don't know, a few towers next to each other, and if he yeets his hammer towards at least one of them, all of the towers in that very specific, or at least area, will also be affected. The fact that this guy has an area splash for the stun ability for his hammer, it's kind of like Thor, you know, having that like Mjolnir or whatever his hammer is called, throwing and essentially hitting multiple enemies with telekinesis powers. The fact that it's applied to this guy but can target and affect multiple towers in a row fucking sucks. Now at first it isn't that bad, because you could just bait him into throwing into like a few baity towers or decoy towers, such as for an example placing a bunch of low level cowboys on the outer path-ish, essentially on the very left path-ish. And this will essentially bait him into throwing it into them, leaving all your other towers, very valuable ones such as accelerators, into dealing all the damage and being safe from being stunned in order to kill these guys very, very easily and, well, in a very fast pace. And these guys have a ton of HP, and at first when they spawn in, they have an enormous shield, and just like every other enemy with a shield or at least armor, you need to take that down before you can actually start to deal damage towards them. So they have a little bit of a shield you need to take down before you can actually take them down, which already sucks much more. And not only that, but we get to the final wave, wave 50. At the very end of this wave, not one Vindicator spawns, but 4 of them spawn. Not all at once, thankfully. It's more or less 2 at first, and then it will be after the big guy himself, the Void Reaver, spawns out. 2 more will follow after him. But this guy is incredibly slow, so pretty much the Vindicators will just walk right past him, so that way you can actually take them down, not have them being such a pain in the ass, you know, just being behind a tank and just sniping every single nearby tower. The thing about this wave is that so many things happens at once that this makes it incredibly difficult to keep track, or at least try to control some things. So first off, on the wave 50, you just want to place down a bunch of your cowboys on the very left side of the path facing the portal they come through, because you want to make sure that the Vindicators are baiting into throwing their hammers and wasting their abilities on those very useless cowboys, while leaving your accelerators, rangers, commanders, and your pursuits to take them down and to essentially bleed them out incredibly fast. However, this is not such an easy task, because there are also these necromancer bosses, the top hat ones, that can also spawn the worst enemy, I think, that can appear in this game mode, and that is the circuit little shit thing. This blue electricity dude gets the powers to go faster than light itself, and not only just boosts himself with the speed, but can do this to any nearby enemy teammates of his. But not only that, it can affect bosses themselves. Yes, you heard me right. These shits abilities that can make them go Usain Bolt can also affect bosses such as the Void Reaver himself, but incredibly disappointingly, I guess, it can also affect the Vindicators. So if one of these necromancer bosses behind those 2 vindicators spawn these guys, you better hope that your rangers and pursuits take them down before they can use their abilities and essentially boost up these vindicators. Because so many times in my unlucky RNG runs, they would just boost these guys up and they will just sprint past my entire defense in the front row of the map, where the entire first stand of defeating the 4 vindicators and trying to bleed out the Void Reaver as much as possible, and they will just go around the entire map at an incredibly fast speed, sniping at your towers and essentially ruining everything up. Now, you can bait these guys into sniping at cowboys, but when all your other towers, aka accelerators, are constantly stunned, and having the 2 up front vindicators being at the very, I guess, late part of the map to where they're very close to the hole in the wall to your end goal, can really mess everything up. And this is where so many of my runs just ended, because so many of my vindicators just constantly spammed the ability to throw their hammers so fast, like literally like every 4 to 5 seconds instead of like every 8 or 9 seconds, that this made it, this part of the final wave, wave 50, incredibly challenging, but also heavily relying on RNG, because you don't know if that circuit dude dies or if he even spawns at all, but also about the vindicators ability times they do it, because there is a chance they will use this ability like every 5 seconds or every 8 seconds, so you better be lucky they only use it like every 8 or at least a very long time to where they can like snipe dummy towers. But apart from that, these guys are just a total pain in the ass, and the fact that 4 of them spawn just makes this incredibly challenging. But after defeating all 4 of these guys and managing to take down the entire onslaught of the unknown dudes, you know, those giant marshmallows who are essentially also stomping the ground but in a slow area that can also stun your accelerators, after you take those guys down, you face the Void Reaver, the final boss in the entire game. This guy is probably, I'm pretty sure, undoubtedly the tallest and fucking biggest guy in the entire game. But thankfully, does not have the most amount of HP in the game, because that actually goes to the polluted monster, who has like, what, 1,600,000 HP or something like that. The Void Reaver has 1.2 million HP. But that isn't saying that this is easier, because Jesus Christ, this guy has 3 abilities. I'm pretty sure 4, but I've never seen the other ability. The first ability that is by far the, I guess, the one you want to have the most of him to essentially spam is him spawning a bunch of his minions. The reason you want this ability out of the other 2 abilities is, or the other, I guess, 3 abilities, is mainly because this ability that he uses stops him in his tracks and makes him pose to where if you defeat his minions super incredibly fast, you can start just blasting on him, to which he can't move for like the next 3 seconds, getting you some easy hits that you definitely need. Also, the more he spams this ability, the less farther and obviously the much more path he has to go on the path in order to get, the longer he takes to essentially get to your exit. Now, the other 2 abilities, which are, I guess, not as bad or not necessarily as pleasing for you, is the portal one, which he spawns a bunch of these void-ish orbs on the map, or at least nearest to any towers. And if those orbs land or essentially spawn on top of a tower, they stun your tower. So there's nothing too special about that. And finally, his third ability, which is his giant sword. He will target the closest tower near him, and if he targets them, he will essentially do like a slam slice, I guess you could say that, and he will essentially just stun that very tower, but also any towers nearby, or at least in a close direction of that tower. But not only that, after he slices them, there will be this giant, also incredibly straight line of like a little bit of like portal-ish things that land on the ground, or purple landmarks, that if any towers cross its path, aka it goes like in a very straight line after he slices down, and after he does do that, they just spawn in an incredibly straightforward line in like about, I don't know, like the entire map, and it goes through the entire map. If any towers, if those land things after he slices his sword on the ground hit any towers, they will also get stunned. So you really have to be mindful on which tower he actually goes for, because I mean, if it's like he slices through the middle of the map, any other towers on the opposite end of the middle of the map will also be stunned. So that ability is also very challenging. But not only that, after he slices the ground at a tower, a bunch of these fallen ghost dudes that sprint will just spawn. And these can range from being like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 of these ghost fallen dudes, and also they have to be taken down with hidden detection dudes, so your rangers can't deal with them. These can range from being around 5 or 6 of them to being like a whole crowd of them that spawn at once, like at least 20 of them smushed together that essentially sprint super fast. And if you don't have any accelerators on the very end of the map to where like the last stand is, then you will just lose incredibly fast. But not only are they just sprinting at the end goal, you better hope that the Void Reaver doesn't use his any other abilities to essentially distract and stun your troops as they're trying to take down those ghost minions of his that are essentially running. This is where a ton of my fucking attempts failed, because sometimes when he spawns these guys and they are all smushed up and they are just sprinting for it, when you get to like the half point of his health, aka 600,000, he will just grow super pissed, yeet his sword across the map, and just slam his foot down, and it essentially stuns the entire map's troops, to where if your accelerators are targeting the ghost dudes on the very end of the map and he stomps his foot and stuns them, you pretty much lost right then and there, because there's no way in hell you're gonna spawn another accelerator just in time in order to take these guys down. Plus, there's like 20 of them, and these accelerators don't do that much of a rate of fire and high heavy damage in an instance. So you're gonna need a commander for that, and this is where so many of my fails just happened, because this guy just constantly just spammed this ability, slicing the ground, spawning these ghost dudes, and then just stomping the ground, pretty much making him get an easy dub on me. God damn it, dude, I just hated it. Anyway, you get to the second part where he slams his foot down, yeets his sword across the map, and now he is at the final stage, I guess. Or technically not the final stage. This is where a lot of attempts failed, because this is where you need to move all your accelerators and the pursuit guys to the very edge of the map, to like that little U-turn of the right battlefield. And this is where most of them failed, because you have to do this in a very fast and timely manner, aka you have to prepare yourself and practice and practice and practice, because once you're spawning and moving your towers over there, this guy will not even wait, because he will constantly use his abilities over and over again, pretty much derailing your entire plan. And you also have to keep in mind you have to use your commander's Call of Arms ability in order to keep up the rate of fire, in order to take this guy down. You want as much damage on this guy as much as possible in a very consistent manner, because if you don't, and you let these guys, or you don't even use your commander's abilities for a little while, this could ruin your entire run. After he gets to a second stage and he is already on his way to the second part of the map, he gets one new ability, which is by far the worst ability out of all of them. Now, this ability is nothing new, stomping the ground, but this he uses this ability over the slice ability, since he doesn't have his sword anymore. So this means if you got his sword super often, you know, him slicing his sword and using that ability super often, then he will just stomp the ground super often. And as we all know, this stuns the entire map, because his stomp ability thing is so incredibly immensely huge that it will stun every tower in the map. Now, this does not affect the pursuit or the rangers, since they are both cliff and also moving towers, so they aren't affected. However, your accelerators are the most vital parts because they do so much damage, and combining them with a commander just destroys this guy's HP. And if he constantly just uses the stomp attack, this will just ruin the entire run, because literally your accelerators don't even have the chance to blast at them, since they'll be stunned for like the next goddamn like 8 seconds. And this is where the most RNG takes place, because he has 3 abilities: the stomp, the portal orbs thing, and then spawning a bunch of his minions. You want to be lucky and try to get the spawning minions, because obviously this slows him down to where he can't move, and you can get some free extra money from the minions to where you can essentially place in more troops in order to take this guy down. However, this is not always likely, and this will not always happen, because you can be incredibly unlucky with RNG, just like me, where he constantly stomps the ground and entirely ruins your run with him having like more than 100,000 HP. Or you can be kind of lucky to where he sometimes uses his minion's ability, but most of the time uses his stomp ability to where you can only get like 70,000 HP left on this guy. However, you cannot do anything about this last part, because this relies solely on RNG. If you keep up the entire strat, not letting your commander's abilities go to waste, and also placing down all your accelerators and pursuits to the max level, you have a chance. But this is not guaranteed, because this solely relies on the RNG factor. Will the Void Reaver be a douchebag and just spam his stomp ability, or will he give you a chance and use his minion's ability a few times? This is solely not on your shoulders, but more or less on your faith, on your sanity, in order to essentially take this guy down. Really, this just final part has costed me so many games that I don't even have the footage of them because I just deleted them. So, this final part is solely based on RNG. Did all of your work and efforts for the past hour go into vain, or did it all just come in to clutch it up? Because this guy needs to use any other ability than his stomp ability in order to give you a chance to beat him. Because if he stomps, it's game over. That's all I have to say. Void Reaver's ability to essentially stomp and his consistently RNG, the huge amount of RNG in this game mode is so fucking just brutal, especially for solo, since I believe this is the hardest challenge in the entire game, is just so fucking brutal that I never want to play this hardcore game. Like literally, I'm never gonna do it. But I finally managed to do it. I'll leave it up to past me, or at least guide me, showing you the entire guide and strats. And later on, you're gonna see at the very end of the video the wave 50 parts. I'm going to be switching the wave 50 part with the clip that I actually beat him, so you know what I did in order to beat him and not just show like me failing. This is it. I have beaten hardcore. Fucking hell. Fuck this game mode. I am never playing this solo again, but I guess I get the bragging rights of me beating it solo, which was not worth it. If you're thinking about beating this game mode, I have to tell you, it is not going to take one day. Because if you lose a hardcore game mode, that was essentially 50 minutes of your life wasted. And you have to do it all over again. You can't just go back to back to like the very last wave. You need to devote time and effort into this game mode. It cannot be something done under a week. It's mainly RNG based. Good luck out there, and fuck this game mode. Fuck this game mode.
shoulder! Fucking hell!
Yes! 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 Fuck you! Fuck you, you piece of shit! Mission accomplished. Good work. Step back, I think I'm gonna vomit!
Fuck this! I'm never playing this shit again!